So, I've been thinking a lot recently about how to explain and describe trauma and trauma healing in as simplified a way as possible so that for anyone who's a little bit kind of foggy or confused or unsure about how to deal with the trauma that they're trying to heal, I can explain it in the simplest way possible. So, in today's video, we're going to be talking about three of the core understandings I think you really need to wrap your head around and really internalize to be able to understand what the process of trauma healing really involves. So if that interests you, join me for the conversation. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're doing well out there. So in today's video, let me just give a little context here, and then we'll go ahead and get into the major points. So, as a coach, I'm always thinking about how I can frame ideas more clearly, more effectively, and explain and convey concepts to my clients, right? I have a lot of clients who come to me who want to heal trauma of some sort or another, or want support while they are working on their trauma healing. A lot of times they're, working with a therapist, perhaps doing psychedelics on their own, and then want support and a clearer understanding of how this all works. How do we heal trauma, right? So I'm always thinking about how can I explain this as simply and effectively and as clearly as possible. And I found myself recently kind of drifting towards a couple very simple explanations that I thought would be really useful to kind of pass on to you guys here. So that's really the point of the video today. So in a certain sense, we're kind of going back to the basics in understanding trauma. So if you're someone who wants to heal your own trauma, or wants to support someone who's in a trauma healing process, and you don't quite understand what trauma is or what's involved with healing it, what's really kind of the core principles involved in healing trauma, then this video is really kind of for you and for those kinds of contexts. If you're someone who knows a lot about trauma healing, this may or may not be useful. This might kind of reframe things for you in a new way, or this may just be kind of redundant for you. And if you're someone who's an absolute expert in trauma healing, perhaps you're a therapist yourself, and you would like to offer your point of view if you disagree with something that I say here, I'd absolutely be interested in your comments down below. But again, the point here is just to kind of bring it back to the basics. So, obviously trauma is a big topic when it comes to personal healing in general and personal growth and personal transformation. It's often what's in the way, it's what's stopping us, it's what's blocking us. It's a huge topic here on the channel, and I get a lot of clients who are wanting to work with me around this. So this is something that, I often talk about. But if this is not your cup of tea, if you don't like trauma conversations, that's understandable. This may not be the video for you, and you might want to just kind of wait for the next video. On that note, for what it's worth, my apologies for not getting any videos out earlier in the week. It's been a bit of a busy week. I got a bit backlogged, so here I am catching up, and I've got more content on the way soon. Plenty to say, I have more to say than I have time to make videos, quite frankly. So anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and look at trauma through three different lenses that I think will start to clarify what this process of trauma healing really involves. And if you're someone who's kind of watching this video, with kind of some fear, you're like, oh gosh, what's going to be involved in this? I would encourage you not to be scared. Even though this can be a heavy topic, what I'm going to share here may really open your eyes and may not be what you would expect. So without further ado, I'd love to talk about point number one, or kind of the major framing around understanding what's going on when we're healing trauma. So the first thing I want you to really understand about healing trauma, kind of the master frame, the broadest context inside of which we're doing all our trauma healing work, is really to understand, well, what is trauma exactly, right? And there are a lot of, brilliant research psychologists and clinicians and, people out there who probably could answer this question in a lot more eloquent, detailed depth than I can. But again, the point of this video is to streamline and simplify the understanding, not extrapolate on all the complexities of that, and so I'm going to give it to you in the simplest way that I can here. I think we kind of know this implicitly, but it's kind of also just so deceptively simple that we overlook it, right? Trauma fundamentally is not the event that happened. It is our learned nervous system response that becomes a repetitive cycle of experience that we're dealing with, right? So whatever we've been through that was traumatic is by definition in the past, right? And or hopefully in the past. And if it's in the past, then it's not really, that's not the thing we're dealing with. What we're dealing with is a pattern of stress in the body. So the first thing I want you to clearly understand about trauma is that it's stress in the body that's being held or reactivated. There are different ways we could think about that. But fundamentally, the process of trauma healing is about undoing, unwinding, dealing with stress that the nervous system has going on for it, right? So, I mean, it's in the name, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, right? Or if it's CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. The fundamental what of what we're up to is dealing with stress. So that's the first thing I'd have you know about dealing with trauma. It's not about the memories per se or the meanings or all that stuff is there and important, but fundamentally, the thing that makes the difference here is, are you getting dysregulated and having big stress states and big stress reactions and big triggers that are loaded with stress? Or has that stress been properly, processed and put in the back, put in the past rather. So first thing for you to know, trauma is stress. Okay, so now that you know trauma is stress, and that's the what of trauma, now we can kind of start to answer the how. How do we deal with trauma? What's involved in actually healing trauma, right? And I really think of it as two different kind of processes that are happening simultaneously where there's overlap, but they are also individual skills or processes, right? So the first of these two processes would be rewriting memory, right? So if you think about it, a stress response, right? A trauma response is bodily memory, right? When I say memory, I mean the broadest possible sense of this term. So, when we're dealing with a trigger where we get overwhelmed, overloaded, or we start dissociating, or we go into fight or flight, or any of that kind of stuff, fundamentally, what's going on is our body is having a memory, right? And that could be memory as somatic sensations, right? As triggers, as discomfort, as overwhelm, as a particular emotion like anger or fear or grief. Memory in the sense of perhaps, little memory fragments, literally of mental pictures or memory of things we, heard people say or things we said to ourselves during the situation. Memory of just dynamics, relational kind of qualities and tones of ways of relating between people. All of these pieces can be stored in the nervous system. And then when we get triggered, they kind of get churned up, stirred up, and projected outward into the current moment, right? What defines a trigger, obviously, in case you're not familiar, is that, our response to a situation is not in kind of clear alignment or accurate proportion to, the intensity of the situation. So usually when we get triggered, we're massively overreacting or reacting in a way that's out of proportion or out of alignment to the situation, to the dynamic, to the moment. And, you can really get a clear sense of that if you're able to step back and look at it logically after the fact, right? So in a major, major way, what we're doing when we're healing trauma is we are working with memory. We're working with what the body and the nervous system has learned how to do. And its predictive, processes of predicting what's going to happen in a certain context and rewriting those memories, undoing those learnings, undoing those memories, processing and kind of neutralizing whatever needs to be neutralized from those old memories, and rewriting in new scripts, new possibilities, new learnings, new behaviors, new choices, new emotions, new states in place of those old ones. So this is one of the two, like I said, one of the two sides of trauma work. So a major piece of trauma work is just dealing with memory and the different flavors and forms of memory. But I'd like to tell you about the other side of that and kind of explain how they overlap a bit. So the other thing that we're up to when we're dealing with trauma is not just memory, but also dealing with stress in the body in real time, live and direct, that arises in response or in conjunction with that memory. So, typically what defines a trauma response is not just some flavor of being triggered and having a memory, but there also being a strong stress response tied to that memory, right? So the other piece of what we're up to here is regulating ourselves or getting regulated through processing and rewriting those memories, right? Now, that's really trauma healing. That's kind of really it in a nutshell. It's memory and regulation, right? Dealing with memory and self-regulating or getting co-regulated and regulating through memories or rewiring memories with a more regulated state. There's a lot of different ways, from there that we can go. So there's a lot of different types of trauma healing modalities and approaches and schools of thought. But fundamentally, they're all different kind of tweaks and permutations of playing with memory and playing with regulation and how to put those together in a way that essentially rewrites the old memories and helps you to understand how to process stress so that you're not holding on to it or suppressing it or having it distort your perception of life around you or your perception of yourself or what have you, right? We all know kind of what the problems are that arise out of trauma, more or less. But the work is simply that. And so how long that takes, how fast that can go, how deep that can go, it's really going to vary depending on, of course, the person, the content of the experience, the connection with the practitioner, the skill level of the practitioner, et cetera, et cetera. But, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here, or I'm getting ahead of myself here. The fundamental things, that I want you to know about trauma healing are just these three things, right? That trauma is essentially stored stress in the body. That stored stress shows up as memory and dysregulation. And because of that, our work when it comes to healing trauma is really about, neutralizing, undoing, rewriting old memories and regulating ourselves through the moments of dysregulation and learning what it is to be regulated. It's really kind of that simple, or, I'm simplifying it, but from my point of view, it really is kind of that simple. And, that kind of does a disservice to the complexity and the time and the effort involved in that and the nuance and the sensitivity required to that sometimes. But that's really the work. And so as long as we can kind of understand that, then we know we're in this dance of working with memory and working with regulation. And so I hope that's useful to you. I'd love to know what your thoughts about this are. Am I making this clear? Does this kind of, really put it in a right frame for you where you understand what this process is and how to go about it? If you are a coach or a trauma therapist or something like that, yourself, leave a comment down below. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Am I really leaving something major out here? I'd love to know. Anyways, I just want to kind of share this again. Going back to basics, I'm kind of feeling this drive recently to put some content here on the channel that kind of gets at some of the basics that perhaps, depending on how you've arrived at my content, you may not have picked up along the way about personal development, about psychedelic work, about trauma healing, about personal transformation and growth. So there'll probably be more of these videos coming about kind of the basics and getting back to the fundamentals. So let me know, is that helpful? Does that make sense? And anything else you'd love to share, I'd love to read. So thanks for watching, and I hope you have a beautiful day. Take care.